Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Chat is enabled if you want to say hi to one another.
Seeing some familiar names pop up in the list.
Nice. Nice. We're just gonna wait another minute or two to make sure everyone who wants to joins. This was a very popular webinar. And I'll say this again later, but everything that we share here will be sent out as a recording, so you can share with other folks on your team. Hey, Joel. Yeah, this is awesome. So many great folks here. We have Blake, Doug, Alex. Oh, Innocent from,
Tanzania, wow,
yeah.
long distance.
Anybody from even further away? Hey, Kyle from Mississippi. Hey, Steve.
Costa
Costa
Rica, nice.
Rica.
Florida.
Nice. Well, it's fair to say we have some great spatial representation on this call. Yeah, you better say y'all. UK. Awesome, awesome. Well, since people are coming from near and far, I'll begin. And I just want to start off by saying thanks so much for joining. I'm Rachel Zach. I'm Chief of Staff here at Felt, and I'm joined today by my esteemed colleague, Mike Magursky, who's our in-house geospatial expert and data products lead. And he'll be going super deep with you today about Postgres and Felt. And this is the first in our Building a Modern GIS Stack webinar series. This series is really focused on how you can connect any of your organization sources directly with Felt, allowing you to quickly deliver performant and collaborative spatial solutions that your teams or clients need to move quickly. We're covering a lot today. Mike's going to take you through how to connect your Postgres or PostGIS instance to Felt and how our pipeline is built to make your data super performant. He'll show you how our syncing technology works, so your team is always accessing the most recent information. And after that, he will demonstrate how fast and easy it is to build dashboards and apps for your team's spatial use cases. And after all of that, I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions. So we're saving time, a good chunk of time at the end for Q&A. Mike is here to answer those technical questions, so don't hold back. In fact, I'd encourage you now to go ahead and click the Q&A button at the bottom menu on your screen to have that up. So as questions cross your mind, go ahead and assume that they're crossing someone else's mind and just type it in so we have that log at the end of the call to be able to go through and make sure those questions get answered. But first, some of you have been with us since Jump and some of you are new to Felt. So a quick overview of what we are and what we're doing. We're a modern cloud native GIS for those fast moving teams. We're super flexible and integrate directly with any of your cloud sources. So from Postgres to S3 to Stack, we can handle all of your massive data sets with ease. The platform is super intuitive. So again, whether you're using our point and click tools or our Python SDK to work with our API and webhooks, our users complete projects in minutes, not weeks. And then everything you build is easy to share because we've built with collaboration. We've been built with collaboration in mind since day one. So when you build those apps and dashboards, you can immediately share them without any other work in between with the right set of users or embed them directly on your website. You have that ability from jump in Felt. And we're kicking off our series today with Postgres and PostGIS because we just know how many of you have asked for it, but also because it's a foundational piece of software used across the industry. However, it's not uncommon, especially in our world of spatial and GIS, to have many different sources. So you might have geotiffs and large rasters in an S3 bucket, or you're working with clients who have Esri feature servers. And uniquely, Felt makes it easy to work with any of these sources natively. And it's this level of performance, flexibility, and speed of deployment that has made Felt the go-to GIS for so many companies across the globe. If you have questions about how to best build your modern GIS stack, I'd recommend you reach out to our technical sales team who can advise you on best practices we're seeing across the industry. And with that context, let's dive into the best pairing of all, Felt and Postgres. Take it away, Mike.
All right, thanks so much, Rachel. So I'm going to go ahead and share my browser window here. Just take 1 second there to do that. Wait for a thumbs up to confirm that I am actually sharing what I'm supposed to be sharing. That's great. All right, so we're going to be talking today about how to bring an external database, Postgres, into Felt. This screen that I'm showing here is just the first thing you see when you click brand new map in Felt. So it's the kind of blank page of the application. And what we're going to start by doing is by bringing an external data source into Felt. Those of you who've used Felt for the past couple of years know that we have always supported uploading files, dragging and dropping things like shape files, geo packages, Excel spreadsheets, geotiff rasters, really anything into Felt from your local computer. But what we're talking about today is kind of the next evolution beyond that, which is to connect to live data sources, in today's case, Postgres, that your organization may host. So let's just imagine for a moment that you're the head of sales for a company that wants to create something like a sales dashboard to share with your users based on information that your team collects in a database outside of Felt. So here we're going to go ahead and click Connect Data Source. And right away, we get that screen that Rachel just hinted at a few moments ago, where you can see the 8 current options that we support for integration. All of these will be covered in upcoming webinars that we're doing. But today, we're just going to focus on Postgres. For those of you not familiar with Postgres yet, it is an extremely popular open source relational database format, and it has a plugin called PostGIS, which is also open source and used for bringing mapping data into Postgres. So the source configuration connection is pretty basic. We can just put in some information here, and I'm going to go ahead and copy some of these values from another window that I have open to speed this process up. What I'm doing here is putting very standard details like username and database name and a password into Felt so that Felt can connect to this external Postgres database and read information from it. I'm going to go ahead and make this just me, who's visible, for whom it's visible right now for demo purposes. And I also want to underscore some of the best practices here. One thing that you'll see is that there's a username called read only. I've created a read only user for this database for Felt's connection purposes. That's a good security practice because it means that we can really control what Felt can see and make sure that, let's say, this information can't be used to modify that data, only read it in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and connect. And the first thing that Felt does at this stage is it will go out to that Postgres database and try to find any spatial tables that are present in it, and then begin to create previews of them. So the first thing it's done is it's found that there's two relevant tables in that database, a vector points table called regional cells with 11,000 items in it, and then a polygons table called territories with just a few polygons in it. And we can see from the previews here approximately what's in there. For the purposes of today's dashboard, I'm going to go ahead and bring this regional sales table in. So clicking on it, I can see a handful of interesting things. One is that I've got a data preview up here in the upper right, just to kind of give me a sense of what I should expect in that table and to help me verify that I'm looking at the right thing. A little bit of general information about it, such as when it was created and updated. And then very important down here in the lower right is this live switch along with the ability to select an update cadence. So I'll go ahead and click add to map. And that update cadence is important because it's the real benefit of connecting these external databases to Felt. Historically, when we first launched, you would be dragging and dropping files into Felt. And if you wanted a daily update cadence, you or someone on your team would have to be the one dragging and dropping that file into Felt on a regular basis. With these live data connections to databases like Postgres, that becomes something that Felt does on that regular cadence, up to 4 times an hour. So these points that are here, they might change every day, perhaps because new sales are coming in or we're hiring new people. Something is happening in that data set, and Felt is doing that work of every day pulling in fresh information and ensuring that the dashboard is up to date without any work from you. So pretty basic stuff. A few things we can see here. One is, that's all of the points around the country. We can zoom in and interrogate individual points. So maybe go into Seattle and see some individual details about some of these sales points. The high performance in the browser is brought to you by open source projects that we interact with and support, like MapLibre for map rendering and Tippecanoe, which we actually sponsor, which is a tile generation engine that makes it really fast and performant to do zoom in and zoom out operations on these dense clusters of points. So just clicking around and zooming, you can see that that entire Postgres table has been pulled in. We can interact with it very, very quickly and trust that when we come back tomorrow, the fresh data from overnight will be reflected on this map as well. So that's great. Let's zoom back out here and just kind of get back out. So now, as a person who's been tasked with creating this dashboard, I want to start kind of exploring this data and creating a view of it that might be meaningful or interesting to some of my colleagues. So, one really basic thing is just kind of how much total revenue does this actually represent? So if we go into components here, on the right-hand side, you can start to bring in individual components that display information about this. So maybe we want just a very high-level statistic on total revenue. So we could say, let's just make a general high-level total dollar amount sum of the attribute called total revenue and formatted with a dollar sign and rounded large values for legibility. And when saved, immediately we can see that we're now looking at about $200 million in sales over the entire country. One fun thing about that is we can actually update that based on the view. So let's say I zoom back into the Pacific Northwest where I was earlier, and now I can see that this region that I've zoomed into accounts for 6 million of that $200 million total. So you can make it really responsive and reactive to what's happening on the map. But for the purposes of this demo, I don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off this update based on view because I'd like a more global set of information about this. So that's starting to give us a little bit of context in what's going on here. Maybe I want something about those regions that we saw in the database connection earlier. So let's add another component. This time, let's make it a bar chart. And for here, I'm going to call it territories. I'm going to go ahead and group by that territory column. I'm going to once again look at the sum of the total revenue. And I don't want to update based on view. So now you have a little bit more information here. You're starting to understand that maybe there's 6 regions with some pretty sharp differences in total revenues between them, with Northeast out in the lead and Southeast pulling up second. Perhaps as somebody who's creating or reading this dashboard, I want some context on where these regions begin and end. So at this point, I'll maybe go back to my data source, bring in that sales database, click through to sales territories, and go ahead and add that to the map. I could have pulled that from a local file or any place else, but in this case, I know that it's in that Postgres database and available for me to interact with. So let's go ahead and just wait a couple of seconds for that to come in, and we'll see some large polygons covering up the screen that give us our sales territories, and then we'll style those so it's a little bit more useful as a dashboard. So one thing I want to do is just make sure that there's no fill on those so I can still see my points. Maybe I'm happy with these outlines, but I would like to see some labels there. So I'll use the territory name as the label. I'll make it kind of big, and I'll make it, I don't know, regular text weight, just so that it's not conflicting too much with those points. So already I've got a very basic dashboard that's showing me some good global context for this data, giving me a little bit of information about kind of what's going on in each of these regions. But let's go a little bit deeper. I think we may have noticed earlier that there was a sales date column attached. So we can do a component based on that time series. And it automatically knows that the sale date is the thing that's relevant for a time series. So it pulls it in. And by default, for this 4-year span, it'll choose a yearly interval for this histogram here at the left. I'm actually interested in maybe something a little bit more granular than that. I want to see months. And when I switch to months, one thing I can see is that there starts to be this interesting pattern of sort of these numbers going up with these sharp increases. So that's something that maybe as a user of this dashboard, I want to dig into a little bit and understand a bit more what's going on. I'm going to add one more component, which is a slider filter. And for this one, I also want to look at revenue, total revenue. And I automatically get presented with something that allows me to select ranges from down at 5,000 all the way up to 30,000 per each of these points. The reason that these are interesting is because these are now interactive. So for example, I can select that large uptick in sales just from January of this year. Maybe I can drop this slider down and look at only things between 5 and 11K. And now I can start to see a couple of really cool things on this dashboard. One is that, of course, it filtered these dots down to just the ones that are selected. The other is that all of these values up here, these totals, are reactive and responsive to that selection. So I can see that these small dollar amount recent sales total up to about 4 million of the 195 overall. And I can dig in a little bit more to understand some of these trends in some of this information. So I'm going to go ahead and reset these back to everything to see the entire data set again. And at this point, I have a great dashboard. I can share this with some of my colleagues. They can use this to investigate recent trends. They can use this to dig in. They can zoom in and zoom out. One of the things that they can do, and this is where Felt starts to really shine and become kind of a unique thing, is I can now go ahead and share this with some collaborators. I can make it something that the public can view and comment on, and I can bring Rachel from this call into the map via invitation. So now Felt does some interesting stuff. I added Rachel. We should start to see her icon pop up here in the upper right as she follows this link, takes a look at it. And we can start to use this dashboard as a document to share with one another. So, maybe there's something about the Bay Area that I think is interesting. In particular, perhaps it's weird to me that there's nothing going on in downtown San Jose where I would expect there to be some sort of sales activity. So I can start to use the comment functionality to ping Rachel and say, why no sales in San Jose? Wait, why no sales in San Jose? And so now I'm using a lot of these interactive multiplayer features of Felt. You can see Rachel's cursor there moving around in the lower right. So we can begin to have a conversation together around this shared document. She's gone ahead and commented, this is student housing, no interest in the luxury goods that we are purveyors of. And so I've gotten an explanation from one of my colleagues based on this dashboard for what I thought was a gap in this data. So it's now this shared living document that really extends the workflow from what's going on in just Postgres way at the beginning to something that actually allows me to interact with that data, interact with my colleagues, learn something about it, and really use it as kind of a shared piece of like visualization and information that we can gain better information from. But what if we want to go beyond just the things that I'm pointing and clicking on here? So let's go ahead and switch back to the slides. Great. So one way that we can go beyond is everything that I've been doing in this demo so far through interactions in the browser can be very heavily automated. Felt has an extremely full-featured API with a Python SDK and other elements that make it possible for you to save some of the engineering resources that you would otherwise use constructing your own dashboards and functionality from scratch. And that API covers many of the things that we talked about in this quick demo. You can create and style elements. There's functionality called webhooks, which makes it possible to dynamically integrate what's going on in that felt map with other systems that listen for things like comments or modifications, and actually turn felt into a kind of central node in a workflow that's bringing data in and then pushing data back out, making it a really powerful element of interactivity. So the example that I showed was sales data, but we have actually examples of real customers that are using this kind of PostGIS integration. Terabotics, an analytics company that works with remote sensing data, is one of our customers who's used PostGIS databases with Felt and really accelerated their development time. They say from weeks to minutes when updating maps for their clients. Personally, as a developer, this is a really big deal for me. You know, a lot of times when you're having to decide how to spend your time, where to put your energy, you're making these kind of build versus buy decisions all the time. You know, do I spend the time to construct an entire dashboard from scratch from raw JavaScript, or is that actually not where I want to spend my time and energy? In the case of a company like Terabotics, for their own business, they're thinking about analytics and data preparation as their sort of special sauce, the thing that they really sell to their clients. Whereas visualization and dashboard sharing is something that they're much happier to outsource to somebody like Felt to use our platform as part of their deliverable so that they can focus their engineering time and focus their engineering energy on the things that they're good at, the things that they're special at, and the things that their clients, customers are really paying for. So thanks, everybody. That was the demo, and I'll kick it back over to Rachel here.
Yeah, so many of the things Mike shared in this awesome demonstration today are available on our enterprise tier. So if you are at an organization that needs access to building apps and dashboards quickly for teams to unlock those sort of spatial use cases, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to our team at felt.com/sales, and I will put this in the chat as well. We have other webinar series coming up, and I'll send that out in an email after this. So if you are curious about how to connect your other sources, you'll have plenty of opportunity to learn about that. With that, let's move into Q&A because it is bumping. Mike, I am going to kick it off with this question about, are there plans to support MySQL or Oracle Spatial?
Yeah, currently at this time, we've decided on Postgres as the one that all of our customers have really gotten interested in. And the list that you saw at the beginning with things like Redshift, Snowflake, and others are what's currently on the roadmap. I think based on interest from customers, we'll determine whether Oracle Spatial and MySQL are good ones to add to that list. It was a big screen with a lot of room for extra buttons. So I think based on customer feedback, we'll make decisions about how to prioritize those things.
Yeah, and I would say if your organization really needs something like this, please reach out to our sales team. They'll work with you to make sure that whatever your stack is can integrate natively with Felt. Great question from Anthony Scott. Do previews of the layers get created every time, or are they persistent?
That's a good question. I'm actually not entirely certain of the answer to that one. The previews Anthony is asking about are those little kind of square image previews showing just a sample of the data. I believe that those get created on the same rolling cycle as the data updates. So in the case of the demo I did, that would be once per day. But I can check back on that because I'm not totally certain about my answer.
Okay, and then second question, uh, wondering if it might take a while if there are a few, and can you navigate in schemas?
Yeah, wondering if it might take a while if there's a few. Yeah, like if there's a lot of tables, for example, would it take a while? Yeah, so the preview functionality is designed to, as rapidly as possible, just sip a tiny little bit of data from each table. So if there had been, let's say, up to 50 tables in that example, you would have seen them slowly fill in one after another, but you don't have to wait for the preview in order to bring the table in. So once you see that list of tables, you can click one selected and get moving, even as the preview stuff is happening kind of behind the scenes and out of view. So that helps speed it up a little bit. And then the second part of the question, I'm actually not certain what it means to navigate in schemas. So maybe a follow-up question can help dig into that.
Yeah, Anthony, definitely follow up with us after. So Doug Worst is wondering, is 4 times an hour the max amount of updates?
At present, yeah. When we've talked to customers, we've heard that 15-minute update cycles are kind of about what they're looking for. So that's where we've targeted the maximum right now. But I think, like with the question about MySQL and Oracle, this is something where we're trying to be responsive and reactive to what people are interested in. So definitely, this is a like talk to sales and we're actively developing and expanding this functionality and would love to make it work for things that we hadn't thought of.
Maxim is asking how many points can a map reasonably support?
That's I mean, lots. I think
Yeah,
if you look at,
test
yeah,
us.
yeah, tons of them. One of the really magical things about Tippecanoe, which is this software by Erica Fisher that we sponsor, is that it's designed to make it possible to deal with kind of arbitrarily high numbers of points. So one of our data library layers that comes pre-packaged and felt has every building in the world. From OpenStreetMap, which I don't know if it's quite a billion, but it's somewhere up in that kind of range. And we use Tippecanoe in order to make that reasonable to quickly render and view on screen.
Perfect. And how do you handle data security when connecting to an enterprise customer's database?
Yeah. Oh, great. Security. That's a good question. So a couple of different things. I mentioned this at the beginning, but I think it's good practice when sharing the database to Felt to create read-only users with very specific and narrow permissions that are only the things that you want Felt to talk to. Another security aspect is that SSL connections are what we make from Felt to the database. So it makes it hard for somebody to snoop on those connections because they're protected by SSL. And then finally, Felt has a list of static IP addresses that we operate from. So if you are somebody who would like to create a very narrow allow list IP addresses so that it's just Felt talking to that database, that's something that's supported in this feature.
Awesome. Okay. Is Geo RSS on the roadmap?
I believe GeoRSS is one of the file types that we support for dragging and dropping in. And then I think the other part of this question is what about the actual RSS kind of regular subscription aspect of this? Um, Currently, that's actually supported just by creating it as a URL. So if you upload from a URL, which was one of the drop-down options in the upload data menu, pulling from a URL would be supported there. And then refreshing periodically would also be supported. So I think you can kind of hack that together based on things that are already present in the product.
And does Felt recognize in a Postgres database table JSON binary fields with a GeoJSON inside?
Ooh, I haven't personally tried this. My instinct is that it would recognize it because one of the things that we've built into the upload anything functionality from day one is the ability to read uh, kind of surprising numbers of geometry formats like WKT, GeoJSON, and others. So my instinct, not having tried this, is that it would probably work. And if it doesn't work, I would almost want to treat it like a thing that we should just fix immediately, because that seems like a really sensible thing for us to support.
Um, okay, let me see here. Is it possible to manage media data such as images by linking them to geometry information or to create geometry data from EXIF in information of drag and drop media data, for example, for field survey data?
Yeah, so taking that backwards, so I think EXIF data in dragged and dropped files, I believe is supported. Like if you drag a photo with a location onto Felt, I think it will actually place it geospatially into the location in the world that the EXIF data says it's from. The beginning part of that question was, I think, about media coming in via database connections. If that media is represented as a URL to some resource in, Dropbox or S3 or something, then yes, that should work. And I believe you can even do things like cause pop-ups to visually display those images and other kinds of nice interactive functionality based on URLs and resources.
And then Carly Hansen has a great question. Can components like the auto-generated graphs be shared with clients or others as dashboard style interactive map?
Yes, that's exactly what we've been demoing today. So that map that I showed and the sharing functionality that I demonstrated towards the end is something that you can use to create a public, maybe embedded map view that people can pan, zoom, and interact with, just as I was doing.
Got it. And then Alexandra Price says, I'm curious if we have a mix of database sources and our own tile server with some other data. Can we connect Felt to both our tiles and Postgres service or only Postgres?
Yes, you can definitely connect it to a tile service. So if you have, live tiles coming in from some other URL, typically as a ZXY URL, that's just another type of layer, and Felt can bring all of those together. So in the upcoming webinars where we talk about other data sources, the kind of underlying expectation is that Felt can always bring all or most of those things together into a single map and present a kind of single unified view.
We're going to go for 2 more minutes here. Peter is asking, does the data pulled from Postgres need to be in geographic coordinates or even projected coordinates are supported in Felt?
Yes, it can be in projected coordinates. So that's another thing that we've always supported with Upload Anything, is lots of different spatial reference systems, lots of different EPSG codes, all of that kind of stuff. People send us data in all kinds of wacky projections. And if they're tagged in some meaningful way, then we can turn that into geographic coordinates and display them on the map.
And Rudo is asking, is PostGIS a requirement, or can you also plug into non-PostGIS enabled Postgres database and utilize a table with columns that have geospatial data?
That's actually a good question, Rudo. Definitely, we are aware of non-geospatial columns and can do things like turn a floating point X and Y into a point, or even a string address into a point based on geocoding. I'm medium certain that that is connected all the way through this PostGIS integration or this Postgres integration, but I'd have to check up on whether we've actually completed that line in the graph. But certainly that's something that you can do generally in Felt. And I will make sure that we can do it with this functionality as well.
Awesome. All right, well, we are 5 minutes over. I wanted to make sure there was plenty of time for Q&A. A few questions that came up from folks. Will this recording be made available? The answer is yes. I will send this out as soon as I get it on the cloud. The second question was, what do enterprise plans look like? The best way to learn that is to click on the link that I just shared in chat, and I will also send out in the email. Fill out a form about what your organization's use cases are, and someone on our technical sales team will dig in more deeply to understand your needs and provide you with a quote. So with that, thanks so much for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks everybody for tuning in. It was really great to present and hear all your questions.
Awesome. Have a great day, everyone.